Finish what you started.
And I would like to know, what do you think that this season have that makes it different to the previous ones?
I think obviously when there's kind of like a shift in creative teams behind the series, obviously like Issa taking over from Nick. I think also because Issa comes from horror, there's a lot more of that like worked into there.
You know, I would like to know how was it to work with a story that mixes, of course, crime and horror, but also all these legends and a lot of native culture, because I think it's really important the themes that the story is presenting.
I kind of like it's funny because I think like at first I was quite like reserved to it in a way. I don't consider myself a particularly spiritual person. But I think the more we got into the story and the more I met people from various cultures of kind of indigenous Canadian or American heritage, the more I kind of started to accept that the world can have kind of discrepancies and stuff, and that they're, you know, like, and then maybe there are ghosts or something like that. But I think for like Peter Pryor's his kind of approach to the case is he's kind of more in the Danvers school of thought, that it's rational and there's a logical explanation. And what I love about the script is that it ties these two things together very, very nicely, in that you can kind of decide how supernatural you like to make it or how logical you like to make it. And I think it does that really, really brilliantly. And I think that, you know, it's a scale, and I think you can slide yourself along it.
I really like the complexity of your character. How did you develop this whole? He has to deal with a lot of things.
When I first got cast, I wanted to get to grips with what life would be like in Alaska. I'm from London, a very metropolitan city, you know, like it's nothing. I've never had to hunt for my own dinner or anything like that. And I also, you know, sadly, I didn't know much about kind of indigenous histories around Alaska or the whole of America or Canada indeed. And, you know, I feel quite ashamed of that. So the first thing was to get in contact with someone. And when Issa was doing research for the show in Alaska, she met a guy called Peach. Peach was a white guy from down south who had moved up to Alaska. And he had met a native woman in high school, and they fell in love and they got married and they had children. And I wanted to talk to him what it would be like, you know, what it was like for him to kind of effectively be a guest on these people's land. And I wanted to just know what life was like in Alaska for him, and whether that was like what he had for breakfast, what he did today, what music he was listening to, what kind of clothes he wore. Those were all things I really wanted to know. And that's kind of how I started to develop how Pete would perceive the world, I guess, the world around him.
There's something really important that you mentioned here, that is that this happens in Alaska. And one of the interesting things about this season is that being in an environment like that, there's a lot of limited resources for the police, like having to use a veterinary to help you with the case. So how was to play this? Like, you're not only playing a police cop, but you also have to make an investigation with limited resources in a place where you are against nature sometimes.
I think that's a really like fun like a really fun kind of little box to set yourself in. You know what I mean? I really like, sorry, I don't want to kind of like geek out on this too much, but the reason why I love like The Last of Us is because you're given like limited resources to achieve the goal. And you're not just given, like, I feel like there's a lot of cop shows or detective shows where, you know, they you know, really just like pull it out the bag. And it's like, how did you do that? I think what's amazing about, like, you know, knowing that they have that box around them is there's limited resources. So you have to try extra hard. And and that's like a fun idea to play with.